Hi, this is Johnny Whitaker, or John O. Whitaker Jr., remembered from Family Affair, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. And you are listening to Then Is Now Podcast.
Warning, warning!
Today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
Welcome to 13 Days of Hallowtober.
Hello and welcome to Then Is Now Podcast's yearly 13 Days of Hallowtober event. I'm your host, Re-Gor. Joining me again on this episode are Patsy the Angry Nerd and Ashes. Glad you could be here, guys.
Thanks for having us yet again.
Awesome. And we are continuing...
I'm glad you're not sick of us yet.
Oh, no, not at all. We are continuing our yearly event called 13 Days of Hallowtober, and our theme this year is vampire movies. And today we're going to discuss the film 30 Days of Night from 2007. So get ready for a fun discussion of a modern vampire film. And be warned, we're going to spoil the shit out of this movie again. Class is in session.
Vampires don't exist, Jake.
That cold ain't the weather. That's death approaching.
They're tearing through everyone's home.
We can last the month.
The town of Barrow, Alaska is preparing for its annual 30 Days of Night, a period during the winter with a month-long polar night. As the town gets ready, a stranger rows ashore from a large ship and sabotages the town's communications and transport to the outside world. Barrow's sheriff, Eben Olson, investigates and also learns that his estranged wife Stella missed the last plane out of town and must stay the 30 days. That night, a band of vampires led by one named Marlowe attacks and slaughters most of the townspeople, forcing Eben, Stella, Eben's younger brother Jake, and several other survivors to take shelter in a boarded-up house with a hidden attic. Marlowe finds the stranger, who believes the vampires are going to turn him into one of them as a reward for his help, locked up in the police station. Marlowe thanks him for doing what he asked and then snaps his neck. 18 days later, when a blizzard hits, the group uses the whiteout to go to the general store for supplies, but is stranded after it ends. While the group heads for the station, Eben creates a diversion by having the vampires chase him to his grandmother's house, where he uses one of her ultraviolet lights to burn the face of Marlowe's lover, Iris, so badly that Marlowe is forced to kill her. As he escapes, the town snowplow operator, Bo, creates another distraction with his tractor, killing many of the vampires, before trying to blow himself up. When he fails, Marlowe crushes his head. Eben arrives at the station, where he is then forced to kill Carter, who was bitten and has become a vampire. On day 27, Stella and Eben see the deputy Billy, signaling them with a flashlight, and bring him back to the station after finding out he killed his family to save them from a more painful death. The trio find the others have made for the Utilidor, a power and sewage treatment station that still has power, and head over there, but are separated after Stella saves Gail Robbins, a young girl whose family was slaughtered by a vampire named Zuriel, who was stalking her. Eben and Billy make it to the Utilidor, but are attacked by the vampire Arvin, who bites Billy. Billy knocks Arvin into the heavy-duty shredder, and in doing so grinds his own hand to a stump by accident before being killed by Eben because he's starting to turn. As the month comes to an end, with the sun due to rise, the vampires start to burn down the town to destroy evidence of their presence, including survivors. Realizing Stella's trapped and they cannot beat the vampires in his current state, Eben turns himself into a vampire by injecting himself with Billy's infected blood. He confronts Marlowe, and they get into a vicious fight, before Marlowe is finally killed by having a hole punched through his mouth and head, causing the remaining vampires to flee. Knowing he'll die soon, Eben and Stella go off to watch the sunrise together, sharing one last kiss. As the sun comes up, Eben's body burns to ashes in Stella's arms. So, guys, first impressions on this movie.
Yeah, I saw this one in the theater, and I thought it was a phenomenal idea. I hadn't read the source material.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really interesting idea. I like the fact that Josh Hartnett was playing somebody that wasn't like, oh, I'm a teenage heartthrob, look at me, oh, Josh Hartnett. And
you see Josh Hartnett?
Josh Hartnett. And you know, I thought it was pretty cool. Like, it was definitely some good gore, and we talked about it a little bit on the Dusk Till Dawn episode, but there's one shot on this overhead, like, helicopter shot of the whole town where there's just this insane amount of carnage going on, and there's dozens and dozens of people on the ground just, like, you know, firing guns, getting killed, just blood everywhere, and it's, like, one of the best shots I've ever seen in a film because there's so much involved, so many people, so many different moving parts. I thought it was awesome on my rewatch, but yeah, the initial one, I liked it. I actually went with a buddy of mine that I worked with at a boarding school, and he was very interested because his name is also Eben. So I was like, oh, look at this, get to see it, you know, because very rarely do you get to see a movie with, you know, your own name. You know, if you're somebody named Eben, or even my name, like I can't think of more than 3 movies where there's the lead character is named Patrick, other than Patrick in the movie Patrick, and Patrick Bateman, and I can't think of anyone else. Like, very rarely is there anybody even with my name. I mean, there's Patrick Hockstetter from It, but I don't want to be associated with that guy. He sucks. So, you know, that was also part of the draw. It was just like, oh, vampire movie with blood and guts and stabby murderness, and Melissa George, who I really liked from Mulholland Drive. Yeah, all right, I'll go see this.
Awesome. Ashes?
So this was a first time watch for me. It must have flown under my radar for a long time. And it's one of those films that has, as a horror fan and just a fan of films in general, it's been on like my I need to watch this list. I have many films on my I need to watch this list. So thank you for giving me an excuse to cross that off my list. But anyways, I thought it was interesting. It was one of those, I had to sit with it for a little bit and kind of digest it, some of the tropes and whatnot that were happening. First of all, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I can't pronounce the name, but there is a place in Alaska. It's the northernmost town in the U.S. that...
give it a try.
No, you
give it a try.
my pronunciations are about as good as my accent.
Spell it.
UTQIAG with a little dot over it, VIK.
Oh,
Springfield. Yes, Springfield. So it's the northernmost town in the U.S. that experiences darkness from November to January every year. So 30 Days of Night actually happens in that one particular place.
Yeah, the closer you are to the Arctic Circle.
And I thought, how brilliant is that? Why haven't there been A, more films, but B, more horror films based, in that vicinity? Because 30 Days of Night, that's horrific in and of itself, just thinking of that, not having sunlight for 30 days.
Well, that's why people, I think Alaska doesn't have a state income tax, and people get paid to live there because of the extended periods of light and darkness, like that whole movie Insomnia with Pacino and Hilary Swank and Robin Williams.
Yeah, it's a constant state of light. But I thought it was so well done. I really enjoyed the concept of the vampires, and I'm sure we'll touch on that in a little bit. The overall sense of dread as the film progresses and the survivors dwindle in size, and you realize that there really is no escape, especially since, they get to a point where they don't know what day it is. They don't know what time it is. There is no, you can't be like, oh, well, they're vampires. Once dawn comes, they're going to go away. Well,
right.
When is dawn going to come? What day is it? Do we still have 2 weeks of, until dawn? Do we have 3 weeks until dawn? What are we doing? So I thought it was really well done in that aspect too. And Re-Gor, you had said off air that your wife had mentioned that it's more like a zombie film. And I've been kind of sitting with that since you mentioned it. And the overall, again, sense of dread, them having to not only hide, but look for supplies and whatnot from this town that has just been completely just overrun by this horde. Honestly, I want to call it a coven of vampires, and I'll explain why a little bit later.
I think you misheard the conversation we had earlier, because Re-Gor's wife was like, hey, you're watching a zombie movie, because he started watching 28 Days Later. Not 30
I misheard that, because I thought she said it was like a zombie film because of like I said, the overall sense of dread, the barrenness of the landscape, the dwindling of the population, and them having to forage for supplies and food and trying to figure out, what their next move was going to be without being caught by these creatures. That's what I thought it was alluding. I didn't realize it was
watching the wrong movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a complete dumbbell.
I thought it was just like kind of like a comparison of the two, because the tropes were similar in that aspect. But I thought it was so for a modern day vampire film, which there have been several, and not all of them have been successful. I thought this was really well done.
Nice, nice. So yeah, likewise, I saw this in the theater as well, and I loved it. And I had actually forgotten about this movie. That's kind of why I ended up watching the wrong one, because I got the titles mixed up in my head. And when I looked at my DVD shelf, I had it on there, and I remembered that I liked it so much after seeing it in the theater. When it came out on DVD, I bought it. So yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to revisit this film too, because I just love how it plays on the fears of, as you said, Ashes, what could happen in a town that lives in darkness for 30 days. I like the isolation. It reminded me of John Carpenter's The Thing. And, definitely for me, it put Josh Hartnett on the map. I mean, had already seen him in, like, Halloween H2O, and I'm not sure if Pearl Harbor came out before this or not, but I definitely liked his... Oh, it did come out? Yeah. But I liked his performance in this, and that made me, want to catch other stuff that he'd been in. But let's dive into the director and writers here for a second. The director was a guy named David Slade, who basically, at least according to his IMDb, did a lot of music videos, and he did an episode of Breaking Bad, and he directed the Twilight Saga Eclipse, which I have never seen.
Oh, so he's a vampire expert.
Right. Now, you talked about the original source material. A guy named Stephen Niles wrote the screenplay for this, and it was pitched as a comic book, and then as a film. He had, pitched it, his idea, and it got rejected. And then finally, years later, he showed his thoughts to IDW Publishing, and so I guess just from there, it kind of took off. And the film had a budget of $30 million, and it grossed over $75 million at the box office. And the critics were mixed on it on their reviews, but it's since gained a cult following, and you can see why. It's just such a good movie. They released a sequel, which I did not know, called Dark Days, in 2010. That was straight to home video. And then there was a prequel miniseries called Blood Trails, was released on FearNet on demand service back in 2007. And then there's another sequel miniseries called Dust to Dust, which is placed chronologically before Dark Days, and that was released in 2008. One of the other writers on this was Stuart Beattie, who he directed actually I, Frankenstein, that starred Aaron Eckhart. I remember enjoying that. He wrote...
Not bad.
Huh?
No, it wasn't a bad film.
No, I enjoyed that movie. He wrote the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, as well as G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, and a bunch of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, which I watched the first one. I saw that at the drive-in once when it came out, and then I didn't bother watching the rest of them.
They're all essentially the same movie.
That's what I figured. And then the third name on the screenplay is a guy named Brian Nelson, who produced... Do you remember that show? It was called 11/22/63 with James Franco, where he was...
The Hulu show based on the Stephen King story.
Yes, where he was attempting to go back in time to stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that whole process, it doesn't make any sense, because if you go back in time to stop something from happening and you're successful, then that thing never occurred, then there was no reason for you to go back in time. So you never went back in time, so the thing occurred. So you can't change the past.
There you go, injecting logic into the situation again. But he wrote for that. He wrote for a show called Murder in the First. He co-wrote the film Devil with M. Night Shyamalan. Another one called Altered Carbon, and a bunch of others. But the thing that really surprised me was that Sam Raimi and Rob Tapert produced this movie.
Interesting. I mean, you don't really get a Sam Raimi feel from this at all.
Well, I guess in the early stages of this film, Sam Raimi was actually supposed to direct. But for one reason or another, he decided to take a back seat and produce instead.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I read too that he loved the concept so much that he had to get it made. But who knows? His schedule probably didn't permit it by the time they actually get to making it. And then we've got our cast, as we mentioned. Josh Hartnett plays Sheriff Eben Olson. Like I said, he was in H2O. He was in Black Hawk Down, Sin City. And he played the character Ethan Chandler on that cool horror show Penny Dreadful. I love that show. Have you guys seen Penny Dreadful at all?
No, we haven't checked it out.
But in that.
We've heard nothing but good things from people whose opinion we actually take into consideration when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that just jumped a little bit on my list. So we'll have to check that out. Yeah,
it's very good. In fact, I think I need to go and finish off the final season. I think I only got halfway through that. Melissa George was also mentioned. She played Stella Olson. She's been in Star Trek Discovery, Grey's Anatomy. She did play Kathy Lutz in that awful remake of the Amityville Horror with what's his name? Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, I just trying to forget that movie.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but yeah, and like I said, she was in Mulholland Drive with Naomi Watts.
Right. Is that a David Lynch movie?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I think I saw it there.
Literally, like the DVD comes with instructions as to how to watch it, so you might hopefully understand it. Because once the blue box with the key shows up, like, just forget about it.
That's all. I'm gonna have to check that out now. I think I saw it, but it was so long ago, I don't really remember. Is that the one where Bill Pullman, like halfway through the movie, his face changes and he becomes a different actor?
No, I think you're thinking of Lost Highway.
Lost Highway. Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's funny. And then we've got Danny Houston, who plays Marlowe, the head vampire. He played William Stryker in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
And he was in Wonder Woman. He was like the bad guy that you were supposed to believe is Ares. I almost called him Hermes.
Yeah.
Ares.
Yep, Ludendorff was the character.
Yes, I couldn't think of his name. Ludendorff.
He was in Martin Scorsese's The Aviator. And apparently he's going to be in an upcoming remake of The Crow. I saw that on his IMDb credits. So
yeah, he's going to play Eric Draven because he's got the age and body type for it.
Right, exactly. They just better not have what's his name, Alec Baldwin, shooting anybody on that movie.
Yeah, there's enough of that history with that film to begin with.
Oh my God! But his dad, of course, is the acclaimed film director John Huston, and his mom was an actress named Zoe Salas. So I thought that was awesome. I never forget the story when the movie The African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. They went to Africa to film it because basically John Huston figured out that he could travel all over the world if he set his movies in these other locations. And I guess like the first or second night they were there filming, the entire crew got food poison from the water, and they got food poisoning, except for Humphrey Bogart and John Huston, because all they did was drink booze.
Yep, they just drank whiskey. They didn't drink any of the water. So everybody else had like amoebic dysentery, but like they were totally fine.
That's so awesome.
Drank booze all the time.
And we've got a guy named
Protally Fit Chased.
Say that again?
They were titty much Protally Fit Chased.
Kind of like Cabin Fever.
Sort of, except nobody as far as I know, in The African Queen, no one pours Listerine on their dick.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain.
That's funny. I think I've heard him. I think I've heard Danny Houston on Gilbert Gottfried's podcast in the past. Of course, now Gilbert is no longer with us, but we got a guy named Ben Foster who plays the Stranger, which I kept thinking, it was funny, Ash, you reminded me of it at the beginning. I kept thinking it was Ben Gardner. I'm like, oh, he's the same name as the character from Jaws. But it's not.
You know, Ben Foster. He's a pretty good actor. He's okay. He was in oh my God, I'm blanking. Inferno, the third Dan Brown Da Vinci Code film.
Yep.
He was in X-Men. He played Angel.
Yep, in The Last Stand.
Yep. He was in he's in a movie on HBO called The Survivor about a boxer who was forced to fight in the concentration camps.
Oh, wow.
And he is in a movie that will be coming up later this year called Finest Kind, written and directed by Brian Helgeland, who also wrote and directed A Knight's Tale and 42, the Jackie Robinson movie with Chadwick Boseman.
Oh, okay.
And that's the one that I worked on, so that's where I met Ben.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, Ben was I was chatting with him one day and at the rap party, and he did assure me that while he can be comedic and you know do stuff like that, The Survivor, not a funny film, very very few jokes. Go into it expecting anything funny.
Right.
I said, yeah, I really wasn't, but I appreciate the reassurance, like that definitely a serious film that they're not taking this type of subject matter and.
So you're telling me Roberto Benigni's not in it?
No. No, but your thing about John Huston saying like, oh, I can travel anywhere I want. Yeah, that's what Adam Sandler does now. Like, I can put my friends in my movies and travel anywhere I want. Like, they made a movie, one of those like grown-ups movies where they traveled to Africa to go on safari. And the reason they did that is because he wanted to do that and he wanted someone else to pay for it. So
that's awesome.
He made a movie.
I mean, that's brilliant. And if you can find the studio to put up the money for you to do that, then have at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my plan at some point. It's like, I'm going to do a movie that takes place on the moon. We're going to go to space.
Didn't Tom Cruise already shoot something in space?
Probably. I know they did I don't know if they did it in space, but they used the ships that simulate weightlessness,
right,
to shoot the porno. So it's like you go up and you have like half an hour of weightlessness,
right?
The one that they put Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking wasn't in the porn, but they had I guess they did that, and it's like, all right, I can see the appeal of that, like.
Yeah, they did a lot of that in Apollo 13.
Yeah, that heavy pornographic material in Apollo 13.
That's hilarious.
Tom Hanks referred to his balls the entire time as his bosom buddies. Hey, you want to know why I was in Big?
Dope. Then we get a guy named Mark Boone Jr. who played Bo Brower. I liked him in this. I thought he was a really good character, and I'll elaborate on that later. He was in Memento, Batman Begins, and Sons of Anarchy, among a bunch of other stuff. Seven.
He was in Seven as he was the FBI informant that Brad Pitt referred to as Stinky Man.
That's right.
He also played the agent for what was the name of their band? In American Satan. He was the music agent there.
Yeah.
It stars Malcolm McDowell is in it. It's about a band that makes a deal with the devil to become huge, and Malcolm McDowell is the devil. And it stars Andy Biersack of Black Veil Brides and Ben Bruce of Asking Alexandria, John Bradley of Game of Thrones. He played Samwell Tarly. Mark Boone Jr. was their manager.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't remember the name of the band.
The Relentless.
The Relentless. Yes, that's who it was. I was going to be like, Sunshine Parade, Happy Turtle Family. I don't know.
That's funny.
But he was in that as well.
Oh, interesting.
He's one of those guys that, like, you see him, you're like, oh, it's that guy. Like,
right.
He was in the thing. Like, because he always looks exactly the same. He's got the long curly hair, the beard. Like, he always looks exactly the same.
Yeah. He's just typecast as a biker-looking dude.
Yeah.
We've got Mark Rendell, played Eben's brother Jake Olsen. The only thing I could find, he did a lot of voiceover work, and he was on the Transporter TV series, which I never actually got around to seeing.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah, I know. Amber Sainsbury played Denise. She was in Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, as well as Young Hercules, and she's only done a handful of things beyond that. And then we've got Manu Bennett, who plays Deputy Billy Kitka. He was in both Hobbit films, and he also, I was shocked to realize who he was. He played Slade Wilson, a.k.a. Deathstroke, on the Arrow TV series. And I remember liking him in that.
Yeah, he was good in that. All right, now that's where I recognize him. The guy who played Carter, I don't know if you've gotten to that yet.
No, that's kind of where I ended it.
The guy who played Carter was Captain Mifune in the second and third Matrix films.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he was the guy operating the APU that the kid, that's what this is named, the kid, was supposed to refuel, and he's the one that he took over that one, and that's the one that blew open the gate for the Nebuchadnezzar. Not the Nebuchadnezzar, because that one was done. The Hammer.
The Hammer, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool.
He just looked weird with a mustache, and this was after that, actually, because the third Matrix came out in like 2004.
Right, and this was 2007, so yeah. Very interesting.
You really parlayed his fame into huge roles.
Right.
I was in the Matrix. Yeah, do you want to be like some guy? Yeah, all right.
I thought it was interesting though. Like even for 2007, they had these cell phones that were so old, and like they find a bunch of melted ones at the beginning, and I was like, oh man, I forgot how much cell phones have changed in the last 15, 20 years.
The melted phone, those were the satellite phones.
Oh right, okay. But even Josh Hartnett had one that was
Yeah, the flip phone.
Yeah.
The little Motorola flip phones. Yeah.
But I liked the whole premise of the people that wanted to leave sort of panicking, and that whole sequence was tense, where they're all basically fleeing the town, and only so many people are going to stay there.
Yeah, because you have to leave before the storm. You have to get to the airport or the regular port.
Right.
I do want to get back to Ben Foster's character, because he had like this almost like a Cajun accent.
Yeah, I guess he did, yeah.
Like, where are you from? Like, and it's not like, it's like everybody knows everybody in this town, but like nobody knows who this guy is. And like making a spectacle of himself.
Right.
Like, no whiskey, no rum. You don't give me what I want to eat.
Yeah.
What I want to drink. Give me a plate full of raw hamburger. It's like, you're not a vampire yet. It's like,
right. So I didn't quite get, until I did the synopsis and did the research, that he's the one that melts the satellite phones. He destroys the helicopter. He's basically, he did all that to pave the way for the coven of vampires to come in.
Yeah, he's a familiar.
Yes.
And like because like the whole thing that we keep hearing Marlowe say through his weird clicky growly language that he has is, we're trying to remain hidden. We're trying to remain, they don't believe in us. Like, let's keep it that way. Like, we're just, a nightmare. We're not real. Like, let's keep it so like people don't think we're real still.
Do you guys know what that language was they were speaking? I didn't really get a chance to look that up.
It was, it's not a real language. It's one that they created specifically for these creatures, and they worked with like a linguistics professor to come up with the language.
Huh.
Yeah, because I looked that up because I was very interested, because it sounded I don't know, it was a cross, but it sounded kind of Germanic a little bit, but it also sounded indigenous.
Right. Yeah.
So I was very intrigued by that. But yeah, they worked with a team of professionals to kind of come up with the language that they spoke. And I always think that's really interesting when they do that, kind of like, Elvish or the Valerian or what have you, for all of these fantasy films and shows.
Right.
And, yeah, it's always interesting to me, the actors who take these roles having to learn a completely different language, but it's like it's not like they have much material to go on except for what's created for them. It's not like you're sitting in class learning Spanish. It's not like you're learning French or whatever. You're learning this made up language.
Right.
That a couple of people know exactly how things are supposed to sound, how you're supposed to pronounce things. So I thought that Mr. Houston did an excellent job with speaking, this language, and it was very believable.
Right. And that reminds me, the original Land of the Lost TV series from the 70s, the Sid and Marty Krofft show, they had a linguist invent the language for the little hairy guys who were called the Pakuni. And that, I always thought that was very fascinating, that for, basically what's aimed at children, they they went to the trouble of making up a language for that.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting undertaking when they decide to do something like that, because they easily, like, these vampires could have spoken Russian,
Right.
And we would have been like, okay, yeah,
Or
they're
some
Russian.
Slavic
Yeah,
language.
yeah. But the fact that they created something completely, and that's why I want to refer to them as it's more than just like a herd of vampires. It's more like a coven, because their features are so distinct.
Right.
And this language that they are speaking, their mannerisms, it's more than just a familial thing. It's something more than that. It's more than just like I turned you and now you're a vampire. It's almost, it's a culture type thing.
Right.
I thought was so different than what we've seen with some of these other vampire movies. Such an interesting take on incorporating what we know of vampires with this newer aspect. I thought it was just really I loved that take. I love that approach.
Yeah, and it reminded me of like something out of Apocalypto, where it felt ancient, what they were speaking.
Yeah, and it's I don't know if it's something, because you saw a couple of the characters who were freshly turned. They had some of the characteristics, the black eyes, and it's funny because all I could think about was Quint from Jaws talking about the shark. He had black eyes like a doll's eyes,
Right.
lifeless, and I thought that was a really, interesting and unique way of creating the vampire appearance, to have those just black, lifeless eyes. But you look at some of these vampire creatures who clearly had been turned a long time ago, and they've been a vampire for potentially centuries at this point. The way that the nose had formed.
Yeah.
To look
the
different.
Slits of the eyes.
Yeah.
Also the teeth.
I was going to say, like, the teeth were something
Danny
that
Houston's
immediately.
teeth were way different than everybody else's.
Yeah.
Right.
They were almost like very thin, like almost like they were filed down, where everyone else, like, they just started to get like
It
pointy.
kind of reminded me of an anglerfish a little bit, not as jagged.
Yes, or like a hatchet fish, where like that lower jaw comes down, and it's got like or a Goliath tigerfish, except more. They had more teeth, like a lot more on the bottom. Danny Houston did,
which made me really.
And they jut out.
That's right, yeah.
Which made me question, like, where were they from? Like, what was this whole process of, who were they and how did they become what they are now?
Right. And I'm wondering too about Danny Houston's character's name was Marlowe, and that's, for some reason, that strikes a chord in the back of my head, and I'm thinking that the vampire in Salem's Lot was named Barlow, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because in the comic he's Vicente.
Oh, interesting. I never did read the comic for 30 Days of Night.
I didn't either, but when I searched on Wikipedia, the comic is what came up.
Interesting. Yeah, so they drew from a lot of what's been done before in terms of how the vampires look, and made their own unique look to these, as you just described, which was amazing. I mean, that was one of the whole film is just amazing from beginning to end. And like I said, that whole scene where people are scrambling to leave the town, it ratchets up the tension so much that I jumped at a scene that wasn't even a horror scene, is when Stella's trying to escape, and the dude Malachi's got this giant chainsaw truck, and he accidentally crashes into her. I jumped out of my chair.
Oh yeah, because it's something you don't expect. Like, I'm driving to the airport, nothing bad's gonna happen. Certainly not a giant chainsaw truck. Oh my god, a giant chainsaw truck! Like, they didn't have that shit in Final Destination. Like, where did that come from?
Right. Oh man, and then as things start to get worse, they get worse for Eben, he's literally pulled in like 100 different directions at once. Everyone's calling him for help, and they're all panicking, and then the helicopter's smashed up, and the old guy gets eaten. And that's another thing about the vampires is they were wicked fast in this. I love that.
I think what it reminded me of a lot, now that you're mentioning it, like anytime somebody had an issue, they would call for him. Remember the scene in First Blood when like Rambo's slowly dispatching all the cops that are coming after him, like with the non-lethal traps, and every time someone gets stuck, they're like, Will, come save us.
Right.
And there's like 10 different people who all need something, and they're all calling for Will.
That's right.
Like, what the hell am I going to do? Like, I'm just some dude. It's like, oh, what happened? All my dogs are killed. What else happened? Oh, Gus's head is impaled on a spike. Right. What else happened? All the phones are melted in a puddle. I did like the nice symmetry with that opening scene talking about like, oh yeah, this is where I took Patty on our first date. It's like, yeah, that's where everybody takes everybody on their first date. The last sunset for a month. Of course you're going to use that to get laid.
Right.
Like, and like, that's where they ended up, and he did not get laid.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, I loved when Eben is driving through the town, and he's basically telling everybody, if you've got generators, go home, turn them on, and load your weapons.
Yeah, I know everybody's got guns, so load them up, and just stay inside, put on as many lights as possible, attract as much attention to yourself.
And there was the old lady that worked in the sheriff's office. She reminded me of the old lady that was on Northern Exposure. I don't know if you guys ever watched that.
I never did, but I'm aware of the show.
Yeah. It was a good show.
Yeah, she was like, when he's looking at the drawers, like, oh, what's this? It's like, oh, that's pot. It's like, how dare you? And it's like, oh, it's grandma's pot because she has cancer. Like, remember? And she's like, yeah, I like to get high. I mean, you saw that the general store was like super stocked with like Oreos and like Jolt Cola.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that.
When you're out in the middle of fucking nowhere, what else is there to do?
What, right. Like taunt polar bears? Like,
get drunk, get high.
And they got rid of all the booze for that month because people are... See, if they had... What they could have done, they could have gotten like one guy, like super fucking hammered, and had him out, and then like the vampires could have drank his blood, and then... They would have been drunk, and they could have like snuck around or like taken a couple of them out. I mean, think about, we've seen that in action in the What We Do in the Shadows TV show. It's like, we drank the blood of some people, but the people were on drugs, and now I am a wizard.
Well, that also happened in the movie Love at First Bite, where what's his name? George Hamilton played Dracula, and he drinks the wino's blood and then becomes drunk himself.
Yeah, like that's just the way it works. Like that's how things are supposed to happen.
That's hilarious. Oh my God. Yeah, there's and then it was so obvious when there's that scene where the chick is walking through town looking for help that they were using her as bait. But I thought that was a good moment.
Honeypot.
Yeah.
She's a honeypot. Like that's the like the old Vietnam Viet Cong, wound a soldier, have him call for help so the snipers can just pick off anybody that goes to help him.
Right. Which Jason did that in the remake of Friday the 13th.
And they did it in Predators with Adrian Brody.
That's right, yeah.
Trejo, which we forgot to say he was in that.
Oh, yeah.
But, again, we also missed about 430 other things that he was in.
Right.
So we can be forgiven for missing one of his films.
That's hilarious. Oh my God! And I like Eben's line where he's like, "We live here for a reason because nobody else can." And
yeah,
that just was very telling about these characters that are staying behind.
Then you got that poor guy with dementia.
Oh yeah,
like, sneaking out of the window. Ugh.
Yeah. Oh man, but there's one moment with Bo Brower it was a really great scene where he's they're all holed up in the attic and he's about to leave, and Stella looks at him and she goes, "We need you here," and they take a moment to look at his face, and he looks at Jake, and the two women, and you could just totally see him internally going, shit, she's right. I can't leave. I just love that moment because they didn't have to have too much dialogue to get across the point, you know?
Yeah, and he was definitely the Quint of this group, like the old crusty guy who lives on the outskirts of town by himself. I can kill most things, and these things are no exception. I'll kill them too.
Right.
Just need 4 stout men to work the bellows.
Vamp's eyes are black like a doll's eyes. The bald vampire
don't seem to be living.
Yeah.
This guy wasn't hammered.
That's true.
That we know of.
Well, there's no booze.
Maybe he had a stash.
I
know I would.
I was going to say.
Fermented snow. It's like, what? Made my own booze from polar bear urine and
30 days of Franzia.
And then there was the dude who it said, like, I think it came on the screen, it said, like, day 7 or something. And the guy was, like, hiding under his house. And for a second, I'm like, there's no way that guy's been surviving under that house in the snow for 7 days. But then you realize he was bitten and he was transforming.
yeah, he was the guy whose wife got dragged out of the house.
Yeah. Oh, so many good scenes in this movie.
I will say, though, I think the scene that really got me the most was when he sees somebody flashing a flashlight across the way, and Billy, yes, he realizes that there's at least one more survivor, and he goes, and he finds out that it's Billy, and his friend sees that Billy has put a gun to both his wife and his child in an attempt to save their lives, but couldn't muster up the guts to turn the gun on himself.
No, his gun jammed.
Oh, his gun jammed.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, yes.
Gun jammed.
Yeah.
Yes. Just the utter look of despair on the actor's face was just, it stuck with me. And then obviously the journey that character proceeds to go on and what happens. But that one scene where Eben walks in and, he's in the bedroom and he peels back the sheets from the bed and realizes that there are 2 bodies there, and it's his friend's wife and child, who obviously he had a relationship with as well. The look on his face, he was just completely unexpected, thrown off. I mean, understandable what he was trying to do in that moment. You feel that all is lost and this is your only option, and you're trying to put your loved ones out of their potential misery.
Yeah.
Knowing what
knowing
what the alternative could be, or more than likely would be, kind of like, going back to zombies, like, a scene in The Walking Dead,
Right.
Yeah. Where they walk into the house and they see
28 days later.
Yep.
And what was the film with Thomas Jane, with the Stephen King one where they were, The Mist. It was kind of like the ending of The Mist there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one was the worst.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
Stephen King said he wished that's how he ended his book.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
Man, I wish I had thought of that ending.
That was brutal. For him to go through all that, only for the mist to just start to go away.
And the army comes down the street,
with all the survivors.
And there's Melissa McBride, who was like, "Oh, I'm going to run for safety. You'll never make it." And there she is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you had to deal with Marcia Gay Harden and her ridiculous insanity of her Jesus shit.
Marcia Gay Harden is fabulous.
And she killed Sam Witwer, who is Darth Maul.
Oh, that's right.
But this is one of those films where there's hope, and then all of a sudden there isn't, and you sit there and you're like, are they all going to get picked off one by one? Are they going to make it?
Wait a couple more hours and we'll do it. Okay, set the town on fire. Fuck these guys.
Oh my God. And I have to say, I thought the bald vampire was extremely scary, but I think that
Dave Bautista?
Yeah. Oh, was that Dave Bautista?
No, that's what I kept calling him.
I thought he was the derpiest looking one of them all.
I thought he was scary, but I think if I was going to give out an award to scariest vampire, it would have to be the little girl that they found in the store munching away on the dude.
And apparently she was part of the group because they're like, oh, did you recognize her? And everyone's like, I don't know who the hell that is. So I'm thinking she was part of the group because, like, they knew everybody. Like, they see one random kid all covered in blood, like, bundled up in a park, and you can barely see him. Like, oh, that's that kid.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Greg and Sally's son, daughter, like, whatever. Like, they just know exactly who it is, like, right that second.
Yeah. But that was just a particularly scary scene, at least I thought, in my opinion. It was
little kids as zombies, like again, Walking Dead, like the little kid zombie. Rick's like, you all right? You look just like my son Coral. She's like, no, I'm a zombie and I'm missing half my face. He's like, oh, I'm gonna have to shoot you. And she's like, all right, do what you gotta do, because otherwise I'm gonna bite you. I mean, this may have played out slightly differently, but that's what I remember.
Oh man, and Jake is the one that chops her head off with the axe. I thought that was cool.
He should have said something like, I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Chop, chop.
I will say there was some very satisfying kills as far as the gore aspect in this film.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with what's his name, the Eben putting his fist right through Marlowe's mouth.
Yeah, got your brain.
Yeah. Get your brain. He's got his thumb in his hand. I get your brain.
Yeah, like I got your nose and your cerebral cortex.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good visuals in this too. Like when the survivors are walking through the snowstorm, I really loved how that was shot.
Yeah, and like I said, the shot that I was referring to earlier, like that overhead shot of just like the initial like night of carnage where people are trying to fight back and they're just getting shredded in the street, and it goes on. It's an unbroken shot for like a full 90 seconds, and it's just everybody's getting trashed.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, there's so many good things in this movie. So then of course Eben sacrifices himself to save the town, which I thought was great. I mean, it was a brilliant way to do it, to inject himself with the vampire blood so they could be on equal footing. I really liked that concept.
And I kind of like the way that he really lulled the coven of vampires into almost a false sense of security. They're almost like claiming victory, like, oh, the fighter has fallen. The one who fights is now one of us. Like we have another strong one to add to our horde as we finish off this town and go to wherever they had planned on going to next. Only to have him mid-change be like, oh, no, I still have my wits about me. And kind of like a not today, Satan, not today kind of moment. And, just punched through his skull, which I thought I was not expecting that moment to happen.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting way to go about it. And obviously, he knew that was the only way that he was going to, not only be able to infiltrate the horde, but get to a place where the head vampire, was vulnerable.
Right.
And by sacrificing himself, it's weird though, because it's like, wow, you're sacrificing yourself for the two people who are left.
That's true.
Like, okay, that's kind of sure, I guess, but it was a really cool scene, and it was a very interesting way that it played out. Again, kind of following the different vampire trope that this film has.
Yeah. I agree with your assessment too, that it kind of reads like a zombie movie because of all the details that you described, and I like that. And I would like to know where they came from and where they were planning on going next, because you're literally at the top of the world. What could be next?
You're gonna get back in their boat.
Oh, that's true. And then what? Just like it's like a giant coffin, so it's just sleep until I don't know.
I have no idea. It would be interesting, and maybe the comic book series that this is based off of. Maybe they touch base with who these vampires were, how they got there, and what happened. Because
I don't think they were paying attention to the time. Like, they knew what was going on, because you would think they're like, oh shit, like
I and it's one of those things where, was it planned? Did they seek out this place, or did they just
they
okay, I didn't get that.
Because Danny Houston at one point's like, why haven't we done this sooner? Like, why do we wait so long to do this particular thing? Like,
right.
Town, spend a month, take everyone out. I mean, granted, because he's like, don't turn anybody, kill everybody, rip the heads off the bodies. Like, don't turn anybody. We don't need any extra mouths to feed. But like, chop them all up and then do their thing. But like, I don't think they were paying attention, because how close did they cut it to the friggin' sunrise?
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Really, they could have burned the town down a week prior to that, and killed everybody.
Well, and also, like, it took them 30 days. The entire 30 days to accomplish what they went there to ultimately accomplish. And even then, they really didn't accomplish it, because they didn't annihilate the entire town.
Right. There's
there
people
were
who lived to tell the tale.
Right. The two survivors.
4.
Oh, there were 4. Oh, right. There were 4.
You had Melissa George, the goofy looking brother, and then the 2 women.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was just thinking of Melissa George and the kid. I forgot
and then
about
there
the
was
other
like
people.
the 3, and then everybody who comes back, they're like, "Why is our town burned down?" And the vampires plan, like, "Yeah, we're gonna burn this town down." Like, so they rip open the pipeline. It's like, so what ripped open the pipeline?
Right.
Like these look like claw prints.
I know. Yeah, they weren't very good at hiding their tracks.
Where are all the what's up with all the headless bodies that have like the bite marks in their necks?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like, they really didn't plan that out all that well. It's like, yeah, let's just let's leave it all up to chance at this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. You gotta wonder now, are like the Men in Black gonna come in and clean up the town? Government, is gonna be like, oh shit, vampires are real. We gotta do something about it.
Gone nuts.
All right, so final thoughts on 30 Days of Night.
I think this is a really good vampire movie. There are vampire movies that are just like the same old tried and true tropes, and it seems to me that every single vampire movie that comes out now needs to have just because it worked in like when we discussed From Dusk Till Dawn, it's like, oh, we could just make a cross out of 2 pieces of wood. Peter Cushing does it all the time.
Right.
Like, oh, what's the thing about silver? Do you have any silver? No, who cares? Like, talking about like the different tropes. Like in this one, like, just because something worked against Bela Lugosi doesn't mean it's going to work now. Talking about the ultraviolet light.
Right.
So it's like they're doing that with all of these. Like, oh, it's almost like that in itself has become a trope to point out the tropes of classic vampire movies. But so it's like everybody has to have, the reference to like the Universal monsters, mainly because that's like public domain stuff. But they don't live in a universe with other vampires. It's just like, people never live in a universe with zombies. It's like, whoa, what are these things? This is crazy.
Yeah.
There's no reference in any like book or movie or TV show that we could possibly figure out what these things are. Whoa. It's like every time that someone experiences this shit, it's always the first time, no matter what it is.
Right.
Zombies, what? No such thing. There's a zombie right there.
Oh my god, that's too funny. Ashes?
Our cat is named Zombie, and she just came into the room.
Oh, cute.
I really enjoyed it, and it's one of those films where, like I said in the beginning. The longer I sat with it, the more that I liked it. And I enjoyed the fact that, somebody really did their homework when it came to creating these vampires, leaning on the old tropes that we know of, but then adding something new to the mix and giving us something fresh that we haven't necessarily seen before. Which as a fan of horror, as a fan of, vampires in general, I appreciate that. I appreciate when somebody can bring something new to the table and do it well.
Right.
It's not like this wasn't poorly done. This was actually done really well. I liked the use of practical effects with the blending of CGI at the time. I thought it was really realistic for the most part. The acting was decent. I liked the overall aesthetic of the film too. Again, the location. I know they didn't film in Alaska, but the fact that they were able to create this landscape that looked like in the middle of nowhere, up at the tippy top of Alaska, it just, again, the overall sense of just dread and despair.
Yeah.
You're watching this film thinking, is there really, who do I have left to root for? Everyone's being picked off. Are there going to be any survivors? Because to be completely honest, I kind of like a horror film where, the bad guy wins and, the good guys are killed off or, something else happens, so I kind of liked the, ambiguity a little bit, especially towards the end there where you're like, Jesus Christ, they got another one. Like, what the hell is happening here?
It's always nice when your environment can almost be a character.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the landscape, especially, the sense of tension, them running from one place to another, trying to set up distractions or take advantage of distractions that they necessarily didn't set up, but that were there. Like, okay, we have this moment. We need to, we have this moment. We need to run. We need to go someplace else. We need to do what we need to do. It's like, are they going to make it? Right. Is everybody going to make it? Is somebody going to get picked off? Is the weather going to cause somebody, something to happen to somebody, because there was the threat of, potential hypothermia and stuff too, with the landscape playing a part in everything. So it was really interesting. Yeah. Very well done. I thought, as far as a modern, I mean, it's almost 20 years old at this point, but as far as a more modern vampire tale goes, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's 15 years old.
Say that again?
I said it's 15 years old.
Yeah. And I agree with both your assessments. I forgot how good this film was. I was so glad that we picked this one, or you guys picked this one, actually. So many great scenes and shots in this, as we talked about. The story's awesome. The cast is just wonderful. Yeah, I highly recommend this movie. I think people, if you're looking for a decent vampire movie that's a little different than what's been done 100 times before, then you should definitely check this out. Because, 30 Days of Night should not be confused with 28 Days Later, however.
Or 27 Dresses.
Or 27 Dresses, but thematically there are some similarities, so I think that's kind of cool.
And those are the prequels.
Right. All right, so Ashes and Patsy, can you tell the listeners where to find you online?
Yeah, so you can go to throwdownthursdaypodcast.com. That's where you'll find some fun articles, access to all of our social medias, and new episodes. New episodes are also available wherever fine podcasts are found.
And you can also find me on the newly resurrected Shark Bites, interviewing writers and doing all kinds of random episodes that you won't necessarily find on Throwdown Thursday, stuff that doesn't quite fit Throwdown Thursday's mold, but always has a home somewhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you too for joining me once again. It's a great episode, and
thank you.
Hopefully, we'll see you on the Dracula roundup at the end of the 13 days.
Yeah, we're planning on it.
Excellent. Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Thank you for joining us for our special 2022 13 Days of Hallowtober event in which we're discussing vampire films this year. I just want to briefly remind you that we've got a live streaming monthly series called the Fright Lounge in which we discuss all horror media for seasoned horror fans, as well as those of you who don't know if you want to get into horror. We've also got a new podcast called The Cult Movie Lounge, in which award-winning blogger Robert Manell and I discuss all cult movies all the time. And here's, of course, our sister show, The East Meets the West, in which we discuss Shaw Brothers films and spaghetti western movies, all of which can be found at our website, Haven Podcasts, that's plural, havenpodcasts.com. And while you're at our website, be sure to click on our Patreon link and TeePublic link to help support the show. We've also got a YouTube page, so please go to youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1 and subscribe to it. And don't forget to hit that little bell so you get notifications when we put out new episodes. And of course, we want your feedback, so please email us at thenisnow42@gmail.com. And you can also join in the conversation at our Facebook Then Is Now podcast group as well. Then Is Now podcast is part of the Dorkening Podcast Network, so please check out the other great shows there at thedorkeningpodcastnetwork.com. That's right, folks. And all of those links, like I said, they're on our website as well as in our show notes of every episode. And we are on all the podcasting apps. So if you like our show, please go to wherever you download your podcast from and leave us a great review, because that bumps us up the list in the algorithm and helps more people to find us. Thank you for joining us today. Class dismissed.
Then Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.
For more shows like the one you just heard, check out the Dorkening Podcast Network at thedorkening.com.